Mark Rogers TV with instant analysis of the Buckeyes win over the Hoosiers 49-21. And I apologize for anyone who checked out our first video that we posted and live streamed that was the instant analysis as the seconds ticked off the clock. We've got a feed issue. The transmission was bad. The video is breaking up constantly. And so I'm going to try to redo this and really run through it a little bit in a more concise fashion of my thoughts about the Buckeyes running away with the game with 29 consecutive points after Indiana played a heck of a first half and really gave the Buckeyes a run for the money. So it's something we talked about throughout the week in previewing this game. And if you have yet to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please do, for the best in college football coverage. Audio versions on Podbean, iTunes, and on Stitcher as well. Just search Mark Rogers TV. All right, we talked about it all week. The Hoosiers have given the Buckeyes fits since Urban Meyer arrived in Columbus. We chronicled those games and the reasons why Indiana has been successful against Ohio State. Successful except for the result, because Urban Meyer is perfect against Indiana. This game was similar, although the Hoosiers didn't have enough to stay in the game in the final 15 minutes or so. They did take a 21-20 lead. So the takeaways for Indiana: exceptional secondary play for the most part, although we saw some missed tackles and we saw some bad angles to the football, misjudging Ohio State's speed on the Johnny Dixon touchdown run and the Paris Campbell 74-yard run with the catch from the crossing route off the hands of J.T. Barrett. Okay, so Indiana needs to play up to its experience level, although Richard Fant left the game early in the fourth quarter with an injury. Hopefully he's okay. And it didn't seem to be serious. Indiana played a really good, strong defensive game, but they didn't wrap up J.K. Dobbins on a number of runs in which he spun away and broke some tackles and turned 5 and 6 yard gains into 15 and 20 and 50-yard gains. All right. Also for Indiana, as was mentioned on the broadcast by Kirk Herbstreit, this may be the best combination of thrower and receivers that Ohio State will face this season, and that's even taking Oklahoma and Penn State into account. Indiana was that good, especially in the first half. Richard Lago throwing to the wide receivers. We saw Ian Thomas score 2 touchdowns. We saw Simi Cobbs, a 1,000-yard pass catcher for Indiana, and some other receivers. We could run down the list. It was pretty much everyone that Indiana throws to. The 4 or 5 deep at wide receiver all played similar roles. They all made hands catches, also outfought Ohio State defensive backs for the football. But despite what I was seeing on social media, despite some of the text messages that were being sent my way, if you know offensive football and how well a quarterback and wide receiver can execute versus a defensive back, you can only do so much as a cornerback in those situations. Those balls were perfectly placed, and the sync that the Indiana passing game achieved between quarterback and wide receiver / tight end was pretty remarkable. They knew when to stop and when the back corner, the back shoulder pass was coming versus when to continue down the field and have the throw go over the defensive back's helmet or shoulder. It was that good for Indiana. You knew from the reputation of the Ohio State defensive line and the defense against the run that the Hoosiers would have to put it up a ton. They ran a ton of plays. Credit offensive coordinator Mike DeBoard for his play calling for 2 reasons here. Because they knew Ohio State's pass rush would be devastating if they took 5 and 7 step drops, so they kept it to a 3-step drop continuously. Richard Lago executed the game plan, meaning he didn't hold the ball and look for a second target. He trusted his first target, his first read, his first go-to guy, and he put the ball on the money. And even if the guy was covered, he trusted the receiver to make the play. And more times than not, especially in the first half, that was the Indiana formula for success against Ohio State's great defensive line. And despite what we saw in the yardage and the plays made in the passing game, Ohio State secondary, for the most part, played well. They didn't miss tackles either, and they were tight in coverage. Now, in the second half, the safeties rolled to help out the cornerbacks. What that did is force Lago to hold the ball most of the time. He brought it down on occasion and looked for a second or third target. The Ohio State pass rush got to him, and it turned out to be a different ball game. offensively for the Buckeyes, it's amazing to see an offense struggle and look like the 2016 version Ohio State. They couldn't pass protect. Although the pass protection was generally good on this night, it was more, again, about JT Barrett not being able to find the open receiver and the Buckeye wide receivers not separating. That an offense that looked this sluggish for most of the first half and even early in the third quarter finished with just shy of 600 yards of total offense and 49 points. That's how many weapons the Buckeyes have. J.K. Dobbins, with no Mike Weber, a 1,000-yard rusher as a freshman last season, and still has to be considered one of the top 5 backs in the Big Ten, on the sideline with a hammy. J.K. Dobbins got the ball 29 times for a $181. That's going to be too much work for him to carry week to week through 12 games and into postseason play. I think the best formula for the Buckeyes is J.K. Dobbins with a few more carries than Weber, depending on how the game develops, but basically them splitting 35 to 40 carries, and hopefully Mike Weber makes it back for the Buckeyes. JT Barrett had to go to the ground game, meaning not just Dobbins, but himself in the second half. Urban Meyer has talked since last season and that shutout loss to Clemson about not only finding playmakers on the outside, but also limiting the running of JT Barrett, that he doesn't want to see him run, that he's running in the past out of necessity of a bad offense that cannot generate plays otherwise. Now, Ohio State had to go to the JT Barrett run, but he only ran it 13 times, which is probably closer to what Urban Meyer would like to see. Ohio State wins it. Also wanted to point out the play of Denzel Ward, number 12, on the corner for Ohio State. He did give up a few plays, but again, they had to be perfectly executed by Richard Lago and the wide receiver. Denzel Ward must have broke up 7 or 8 passes in this game, and Ohio State's defense took hold. It is one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in college football. If they get the pass protection that they got tonight and the push in the running game that they got, and can get some running relief for J.K. Dobbins, meaning Mike Weber in particular, can get back to full health, and they get the playmaking on the wide receivers that we saw glimpses of and saw on full throttle in the second half, then the Buckeyes can live up to expectations. It's Oklahoma in Columbus in 10 days for Indiana. The challenge here for Tom Allen, who showed so much exuberance and fight in leading a program that he has dreamed about leading, moving and transitioning from defensive coordinator now to the leader of this Indiana football program, high-fiving the student section before the game, giving a passionate speech before the game about not giving up, about fighting to the end, and showing tears of emotion and just being overwhelmed by the moment and wanting to lead this Indiana football team to success. This needs to be sustained. It's easy to get hyped up and amped up and ready for Ohio State coming to town. Next week, Indiana goes to Virginia, a team that they are better than, but not so much better than that they can survive a classic letdown. They could lose to Virginia easily in Charlottesville, but they're better. So Tom Allen needs to show that this team's going to be consistent from week to week and that they're going to bring it from week to week, especially against the better non-conference teams and, of course, once they get into the Big Ten. Check out my Big Ten predictions. I forecasted Indiana at 7-5 overall, 4-5. That would have been 7-5, 4-5, yes, in the Big Ten, and Ohio State at 11-1 and moving on to the college football playoff. My thoughts? Now I would like to hear from you right here on Mark Rogers TV. And again, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter, and like me on Facebook, and we will discuss and debate college football.